direction when it comes to nutrition and fitness? Have you find that perfect medium, or is it always changing?
I think it's always changing. You mentioned earlier just, things are always kind of evolving and changing, but I think because we're
Mm.
humans, we're complex beings, things are always different. There's so many things for us to take into that equation of our health. And so, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough exercise? What am I eating? What am I not eating? What kind of nutrients am I getting? Am I not getting enough nutrients? So, over the years, I have obsessed about food. I did.
You're just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
Come here, though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
I know, and sometimes I get caught up in like the rabbit hole of like watching those YouTube videos of,
Oh, yeah.
look at my studio space, and then I'm just like, I just changed it, but let me do it again. My wife always makes fun of me because I constantly change it.
Same. My life is one big rabbit hole.
Yes. Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you just got for the studio that you're excited about? Your podcast studio?
I did get a DBX 286S preamp,
Ooh.
so I feel like I'm very high speed now that I have a channel strip processor, however you say it.
Yeah. It was just a cloud lifter, or?
No, so I had the cloud lifter, and so I'm actually using it. I've been going back and forth. I have two microphones. I have the Shure SM7B, and then I have a Sennheiser MK4,
Nice.
and I keep going back and forth trying to figure out which one I like for what purposes. So I'm playing with the MK4 today,
Nice.
running through the preamp, but I did have the cloud lifter for the Shure SM7B. The 286 is definitely the way to go. So
Yeah. And you just do that through the computer?
So
Okay.
it's
Very
I
nice.
still have an interface. So I still have like the Rode. A lot of people have the Scarlett,
Yeah.
S whatever they are. I have the Rode AI1. So just the same thing, but it's made by Rode.
Yeah. I have the Rodecaster Pro too, and I've been
Okay.
using that for quite some time. I love that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's literally what I use for everything, for editing, it's my interface for the whole computer. This just way better.
Nice.
And now that I've been so immersed in podcasting the last couple of years, I don't like listening to anything audio related without my headset,
Yeah.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
why I use this interface for like everything. So when I'm like editing videos, I have this on. So like when I get done at the end of the day, because I had a long editing day today, my ears are so red and swollen and sweaty, but it's like the only way I can consume audio now. Like even when I watch YouTube videos and I try watching on my phone, it's just.
And you've got glasses like I do, and I think that makes like
right.
the end of the day, my head is hurting because my glasses are sticking in there
It's
for
the
so
worst.
long. But
Contacts, I could do that, but then I'm like,
yeah,
those end up drying out after a couple hours. It's just you can't win when you have
no.
glasses.
And random total story here. I don't know if we're recording for the show or not.
Oh
but
yeah, we're going. Feel free.
Good.
Yeah.
So random story why I don't wear contacts anymore. My husband about 6-7 years ago now got a random MRSA infection in his eyeball, and his eyeball blew up to 3-4 times the size of what it should have been. It was like bigger than a golf ball. It looked like this monster eyeball. The doctors couldn't save it. The infection was so bad it was at risk of having the MRSA infection, because the eyeball is like this self-contained organ, and so there was MRSA in the eyeball, and he was at risk of having MRSA. If it shot out of the eyeball and through the optic nerve, it would have gone to his brain. MRSA in the brain would have most likely killed him, so they had to take his eyeball out. So after that, I was like, well, I don't need to be sticking things in my eye.
Dude, okay.
daily.
Well, I'm convinced not to have contacts anymore. Thanks, Stephanie. Shit.
Yeah, so no more contacts for me, so I've been trying to up my glasses game here.
Wow, that's how long ago was that?
That was about 7 years ago, 2017, I think it was. So
I'm sure he's adjusted, obviously. So I'm sure you're never going to get used to it. But yeah. Ugh, that's crazy. Yeah, it's and it's kind of terrifying. Like with anything, right? Like you talk about whether it's that or LASIK or really any type of major surgery. And we talked about this on your show when it comes to surgery from Crohn's, which I want to get into your story as well. But it's always a double-edged sword, right? Because just people, we don't know what's going to happen, number one. Number two, we're listening to experts, and sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. And it's this weird battle that we play as humans. And that's when I learned a long time ago when I was diagnosed, and I've dealt with so many issues since then that are not related to Crohn's, which I don't know if we mentioned on your show, but I had a tumor in my lung just last year, and I had to get that removed. Thank goodness it was benign. But you deal with all these issues, and you don't really know sometimes what caused them, and even if you did, you don't know what path you should take. And if you have some perspective on kind of what we are, and that's why I'm so like interstellar when it comes to this stuff. And again, my wife always makes fun of me because her For You page is way different than mine. Like mine is so conspiracy theory, but it's also like very like stoic. And, I always look at the glass is half full for sure. But then I'm also like, people have it worse in other places. And like when all that stuff happened to me just in the past 12 months, 18 months, where not only did I get laid off, but, my wife's father passed away. And then the same week, like I had this tumor, and then I didn't have a job. And it was like this, it was all this at once. And I'm like, some people don't have shoes and they're walking around getting chased by lions. Like if you just as a whole step back and take a look at like humanity and the world of these 8 billion people, we don't really have that big of problems here in America.
Yeah. It kind of goes along. One of the things I've really gotten into over the last few years is just gratitude and practicing gratitude, because we forget, especially after my husband's experience almost dying, but we forget how we take it for granted, how fragile life is, and just how things can change in an instant. And so just being grateful for, okay, things might suck. Maybe we lost our jobs or we're dealing with a chronic illness, and we can really get ourselves wrapped up in those things. But taking a step back to just remember that, man, we're alive. We have a roof over our heads. If you're listening to this podcast, then somehow you have access to an audio device. So, you've got to look at the bright side of things and think about the positives that we have.
Yeah. And I think it's, of course, everyone's like, well, Stephanie and Tony, it's easier said than done. It is. But I think a lot of that is the type of content you're consuming, right? Like, because again, I go back to For You page where I'm consuming a lot of that content versus, if you follow those folks in New York that have these crazy lofts that look over Central Park and, all the Amazon cool finds. And, if you follow all that stuff, you're going to want that materialistic stuff, and you might spend a lot of money, and then you might not have money. And then you find yourself stressed out, and then that affects your relationships with, your spouse or with your friends. And there's just this ripple effect that we don't understand because we're kind of sucked in this like materialistic world. And when you can just surround yourself with, like you said, that gratitude, and you can immerse yourself in kind of that world, you see things a lot differently. And, you're not, I've been big into like grounding, which I don't know if, so, and I kind of blame it on my dog, which he's napping right below me. But he has to go out in the morning, obviously, first thing. Sometimes it's at 6, sometimes it's at 2. And I find myself walking out in the grass barefoot. And I started doing that every morning for quite a while now. And I don't want to say there's like, I'm not going to like put on my hippie hat and say, oh, there's some great. But it's interesting because it's out of my normal. And we're so comfort with like carpet and like wearing shoes and like all that stuff. But when you can actually get outside and feel the mud and the gunk and the wetness of the grass, you just feel this like grounded connection that you're not as big as you think.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of makes you pause and just think about, you look around, you are more aware of your surroundings and the senses, the sky, you feel the grass under your feet, and all of a sudden you're paying attention to the sunshine, and you're paying attention to the sky and the trees, and it just refocuses the brain. It's got a cool effect. I know there's a lot of science behind it. My problem is like I'll read all the science and I'll like digest all of this information, and then I can't remember any of it. I'm just like, I just remember grounding was good.
Yes. Well, it's like all that stuff with circadian rhythm, right? That recently that came out, and there's obviously a much better podcast than what I'm talking about. But like you look at like Huberman Lab, which is one of my favorite podcasts. He talks a lot, at least like once a month, on circadian rhythm and just the benefits of going outside first thing, not ingesting coffee, and waiting in like 90 to 120 minutes before
Mm-hmm.
you have any caffeine. And the first 10 minutes of the day, you go right outside, you splash some water on your face beforehand if you need to. You go outside and you just let the sun hit. And if
Yeah.
you get up before sunset, turn on all the lights in the house as bright as you can, and you just kind of wake your body up first thing in the morning. And studies are saying that you'll have sustained energy longer throughout the day. So then we can kind of eliminate the caffeine throughout the day
Yeah.
if we do that. Because we've all been stuck in that, right? Where you have caffeine first thing in the morning, and then like by noon, you're like, I need to pick me up. And I do find the correlation to be quite true with that, because like just today, I just finished a coffee from Starbucks. My wife picked up some stuff for us, and today was the day I didn't go outside first thing. I didn't walk bare feet or barefoot in the grass. I don't know if there's any correlation to that, but it's kind of funny how the days that I need to pick me up are the days that I don't do everything right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's fascinating. And it could also be a lot of like routine. And maybe when
Yeah.
I'm stuck in the routine, things go well. And when I get out of the routine, that's when I need the caffeine and that's when I need the boost. That could be possible too. But it's interesting.
It is interesting. And it's fun to kind of start, I don't know, I'm like I overanalyze way too many things, but I start thinking about, okay, so why did this happen? Why am I feeling good this way? Or did I not sleep? You know, what was my REM sleep? What was my heart rate last night? Why am I extra tired today? Why do
Yeah.
I need that coffee more? Did I not get outside? Did I not work out?
Oh, especially
And then
with
there's too
Crohn's,
many
right?
variables.
Yeah. Especially with Crohn's, we overanalyze like crazy.
Yeah.
At least I do. Like when I have, just the other day, too much information here, TMI, but just the other day I had an episode where I think it was actually maybe after we spoke, where, I talked about my issue where I get backed up for so long, where it was like 5 days. I was backed up and I was cramping and I had some really bad stomach spasms. And then I just ended up not eating. I did a huge intermittent fast. Normally I'm only like 12 hours, maybe 14-hour intermittent fast. I almost did 20 the other day. And then now today I have some relief. I feel good. But it was just like my intestines need a little break.
Yeah.
And I found myself like in that 5-day window, I was like, what did I eat? Okay. So I went back and I tried. And I started to overanalyze. And sometimes, it could just be stress. It could be maybe I didn't get enough sleep and I don't know it. There's so many variables, and it's easy to overanalyze, but also too, the reason I think we overanalyze is because there's way too much shit. There's way too much like information out there, or it's so easy, right? To do it.
And then you start reading one thing, you go down a path, and then you pick up one little side nugget of it's like, okay, now I got to research that, and
that's right.
It's never ending.
Yeah, and whether you have a chronic disease or not, even if you're just looking into like, I don't know if I told you this, but my wife's pregnant. Did we talk about this?
No, congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
First, I'm gonna assume.
It is first. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So she's I think 16 weeks this past week, or maybe 17 weeks. But we find ourselves, of course, just like new parents, researching everything. And as you know, being a parent, there's one is like, you should coddle. The other one's like, don't ever coddle. Like so with anything, whether it's a chronic disease or whether it's being a new parent or, if it's planning a wedding, there's always like two sides and sometimes like 15 sides of each of those sides. So we just have to kind of like sometimes take a step back and, humble ourselves a little bit, learn as much information as we can, but also kind of gather our own information that works for us. Because sometimes all this stuff could be overwhelming. And if you just, if you're smart enough and use critical thinking and just understand, I don't know if there's one way that's the best, like for anything, I would say.
For anything. A lot of times too, we take in so much information, but we have to I often remind myself that people have been living for however long, eons.
Millions of years, yeah.
Millions of years, eons, I don't know. We've been alive for a long time.
Yeah.
And before technology, before the internet, before all this stuff, people knew what to do. People knew how to give birth. They knew how to raise children. They knew how to go about their daily lives. And so I think if we cut out the noise, so to speak, and remind ourselves to step back, that if we listen to ourselves, I think innately our bodies, we know what to do. So being a parent, I would imagine that follow your gut, follow your instincts. You're going to know how to take care of that baby and what the baby needs.
That's so true. Wow, what a great way of saying that. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, obviously we didn't live to 100, you know, back a million years ago. We probably lived to like 20.
So we got eaten by a woolly mammoth or something. But.
Right, exactly. So I guess things have changed. But yeah, there is an instinctual something in our DNA that allows us to survive, and that to be true if you're ever in a crazy incident, whether it's maybe a car accident or you're in some type of fight or disagreement, whether that's physical, emotional. We kind of have these like instincts that allows us to fight back and to lift a car, so to speak, right? When you're kind of in that, you always hear about that when something happens to your child and your mother has this crazy strength, and that's instinctual, and it is built into our DNA, and we definitely forget about that for sure. It's even more interesting. Like I talk about my dog, and it's true with any species. It's true when you look at a dog and somehow they know exactly what another dog is. As a puppy, they know it's a dog, and they know it's a cat too, which is, they act differently around cats. Most dogs do anyway, than they do other dogs. And, as a puppy, we had our little corgi watching a TV, and we're watching like the History Channel. And, we saw these like massive fields of lions and gazelles, and he would be mad at the gazelle, or excuse me, he'd be mad at the lion, right? And not at the gazelle. So it's like, and that was a TV. So there is something instinctual inside him, and it's not far-fetched to understand that is also embedded into us,
For sure. Now my dogs, they might have a lot of the instinct in them, but I'm not sure. My bigger dog, I'm not sure she understands what a mirror is. As I think she's a little confused at who that dog staring back at her is, but that's true. Not part of their natural environment.
Yeah, which is so funny because with any dog or any animal, you put them in front of a mirror, and I would imagine it's got to be semi-terrifying because not only are they seeing that double dog, but they're also probably seeing double of you, and they're like, how is there two of you? And then they turn around and there's only one of you, and like, this is some sorcery. But but anyway, so first of all, I heard the episode. Great job.
Awesome. Thank you for being on it.
No,
so easy to talk with you.
It was so cool. Thank you. And we'll obviously leave, for anybody that doesn't know, Stephanie hosts a podcast where she not only talks about Crohn's, but she interviews guests that suffer from Crohn's disease as well as other diseases as well. But I'll leave the links there. But if you can, let people know about kind of your podcast and what it's about, and that way they could check it out.
Yeah, so I started my podcast called Crohn's Fitness Food because we talk about Crohn's fitness and food. So it's aptly named. So I started the podcast, I think, in 2019. And really, I wanted to do it because I've had Crohn's. My first symptoms were in 2003. So it's been about 20 years for me. And throughout that journey, I have relied on the stories of other people. I always wanted to know, there were things happening to me, and I wanted to hear it from someone else who's going through the same thing. So I scoured every blog and not so much Instagram in the early days because it wasn't there, but a lot of blogs and stories, and just trying to find other people that could understand what I was going through and to hear it from them. So as my journey progressed in 2019, I was like, well, I want to start a podcast so that I can help share the stories of people with IBD, because people with chronic illness, especially Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, every story is different. It's the same disease, IBD, it's the same disease, but it's as if every single person has their own unique experience with it. There's a lot of overlap, which is where I think we can learn a lot from each other and just, know that, man, I have explosive bloody diarrhea. I hope somebody else is experiencing that, that I'm not the only one. Yeah. But so we might have those similarities, but there's so much different. I can eat red meat and drink wine. You tell that to another Crohn's sufferer and they're like, stay away, I cannot have any red meat, and
That's right.
it's just very different. So
Yeah.
so that's why I started the podcast, because I love audio. My undergraduate degree is broadcast journalism. So I've always loved kind of the whole radio broadcasting journalism, interviewing people. So it was kind of within me, and I thought, how can I use my skill set that I have and my love for tinkering with technology
Mm,
and help share these stories. So that's when I started it, and I just interview people, they share their stories, and people are able to connect through it that way. So.
yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I definitely don't eat red meat and wine. So I used to drink all the time. I mean, I do miss it. I've been, I think, I don't know, going on like almost 4 months sober since October.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And, it was mainly a choice for two reasons. A, because I was curious. I was curious on how I would sleep, because I was having issues with that. Of course, my Crohn's, I was having some issues still, even after eating all the right things. I was still having issues. And I think we talked about this on your show, but I don't know if obviously there's not a cure, but I think with a lot of chronic diseases, I don't think there is going to be a one solution fits all.
Yeah.
So when I was trying all these different things and everything was working fine, and then boom, I had an episode. I was like, ugh, man, I thought I was doing everything right. And I just think it's going to constantly evolve, and you're going to have to change it as you get older, and it's going to get more and more difficult. So I was like, eventually I'm going to have to cut out alcohol anyway. Like there's no 90-year-old healthy old dudes that drink alcohol all the time. It just doesn't, because as you get older, your liver just can't handle it.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then that means your liver has a shelf life. So I'm just going to start it now. I'm just going to give my liver a little break. Let's see where this goes. Worst case scenario, if I'm 70 and the doctor's like, dude, your liver is like a 20-year-old. I'm like, right on, let's drink some whiskey. But I'm going to wait and just kind of see how that goes. So that was one part. And then also the other part is, of course, my wife, when we found out she was pregnant, I was like,
supporting her.
Yeah, I'm going to do it with her, because I don't want to say I hate, that's a strong word, but because I'm plant-based and vegan, especially now that she's pregnant, I don't want, we have to do what's best for the baby. So I told her, hey, listen, I appreciate you eating plant-based, because she's been eating plant-based for years with me. But I'm like, but now I think it's important that, you increase your meat, have some chicken, have some eggs, want those good fats and good proteins. And then, of course, if the doctor's like, hey, scale it back a little bit, then we'll listen to them. As you're pregnant, you want to be careful with fish, especially no sushi, no, they even tell you no deli meats.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I forget the chemical that's in it, but there's some sort of chemical when it's raw that isn't good for developing fetuses, and which is fascinating to me, because I kind of knew that going into it, because as a Crohn's patient, you hear a lot of research of like deli meat's the worst thing you should.
Yeah.
Right. And then we think, okay, so if it's bad for someone that has a chronic disease, and you
Probably
can't
bad
have
for everyone.
Yeah, you can't have it as a pregnant. So it's just bad, right? Like that's, and they even say same thing with alcohol. We go back to that, where you don't want to have alcohol really before you're 25, even though it's legal at 21, because your brain isn't fully developed. So it could be detrimental long term if you consume alcohol below. Well, I wish someone told me that, because I was getting wasted every night at the age of 18. So it's like all these things that you find out when you do the research, and it's like, even though it's legal, doesn't make it good for you.
Plus, you got to be in the mindset for it. But I've been cutting back a little bit on my red wine consumption. So first of all, my husband is a wine snob. So he's taken me down this journey from when he met me, I was drinking boxed wine. And now we're drinking very expensive, nice wine. So we've got a very large collection. But I've started to notice, we're very complex beings, but I've started to notice that I would wake up after one drink, one glass of wine, I wake up the next day and I feel terrible and I just feel like crap. So it's like, well, how much can I drink or shouldn't I drink? So I have not gone like completely sober, completely no alcohol, but I have started trying some of these new products. I don't know if you've tried them or not, but Apothecary is one that I've just started trying, but it's like the no booze. It's got the herbs, ashwagandha, different, mushrooms and things in there to kind of relieve that stress and bring the calm. So Apothecary had one I found on Instagram. So
Of course.
I bought it. But it's called, what is it? It's Stop Your Whining. So it's, little powder, mix it all up. But I've been taking that. It's not the same as getting drunk, and I'm not even so sure that I feel calmer from it, but it's fun to try. So
send me that on Instagram. I'm curious about that. I've when I first started cutting out booze, I tried this company Monday, which is very fascinating because they have like a whiskey, a gin, and I think a mezcal. So, and of course they partner up with like some interesting brands where you can make craft cocktails or mocktails, as it is, and the drinkability of it is very similar. It kind of gives you that like, ooh, it's an alcohol.
Yeah. It doesn't taste good, but
right.
But I'm still gonna drink it. No.
it's relatively right. It's surprisingly enjoyable, considering it's fascinating. Like as you're drinking it, I think the whole concept of it is, and this is kind of like alcohol as a whole. We don't think about it, but we drink it for the social aspect usually. There's not a lot of people out there, unless you've been doing it for a while, where you're like, Jack Daniels is great. It tastes good. It's like my favorite drink. Usually it's not like that. It's usually the drinkability and the social aspect of it. And that's great. That's what I found with Monday and some other companies. There's a really great one that is Hop Water that I enjoy, where what's great about them is kind of the same thing with you, where it has like adaptogens and nootropics, where it allows you kind of that calming feeling. Yeah. So that part's very fascinating as well, because that is the best part, I think, about wine in particular, is like that wine buzz is ooh. Right? There's something cool about that. Oh yeah. That's what I miss about the wine buzz. I don't really miss like booze. I don't miss beer and that feeling of like getting full. Yeah. Man, that buzz of wine, ooh, there's something special in that second, third glass. You know what I mean? Like there's something good, and I get that from Hop Water after having a few of them. It's essentially
nice.
It's like sparkling hop water. I mean, that's what it is.
I'm going to have to try that, because I'm getting nothing from Apothecary. Like, I want some kind of feel good.
Yeah, it's cool. But, and also what I love about kind of that aspect of it is when you switch to something like that versus like going out to dinner and having a couple glasses of wine, your bill's a lot less at dinner.
Yeah.
Like when you cut out the drinking, it's fantastic how much money you could save. And,
a lot.
Yeah, and that's something we don't really think about as well, because, it's just the whole bill is what you're seeing. But when you start like overanalyzing, kind of like we do, when you overanalyze and you look at it, you're like, wait a minute, so a glass of wine or a cocktail, that's the same price as my meal.
Yeah. And
has zero benefits. And you can even argue saying like a meal at a restaurant has zero benefits, because it kind of does. Because I'm sure it's not like nutrient dense as something if you were to make it at home. But let's say that the meal at the restaurant is very nutritious for you. Let's say hypothetically, that might be worth $10, maybe. But like a shot of tequila or a tequila sunrise or a Moscow Mule, that's $10 to $15, and that has zero benefits to you.
Yeah.
Except to make you feel good, sure, temporarily, but then the hangover afterwards and the lack of sleep that you don't even know you're getting. Like you talk about REM sleep, you're not getting the REM sleep when you drink alcohol. So it's, I don't want to bash alcohol because I do miss it and love it. It quickly became into like a bashing alcohol rant, but
I digress.
yeah. I mean, we digress. But at the end of the day, it's interesting when you start breaking down and overanalyzing. There's some good things that come from overanalyzing this type of stuff, because you don't understand the effects that it causes, right?
And we always learn it. We always learn a little bit more.
We always learn. And, who knows? I mean, it might come down, we're finding all this stuff out now. Maybe 20 years from now, they're like, alcohol is the best thing you could take for your sleep. Who fucking knows? I mean, it's ever changing. I mean, it wasn't it like back in the 50s where doctors were prescribing cigarettes, because they thought it was good. Yeah. And it was probably because they were getting paid by, Marlboro and all those. But they said it. People did it because they're like, ooh, yeah, it's cool. Let's do it. It's the way to go, right? John Wayne's smoking it. It's got to be good for you.
Got to be good.
Yeah. And then we find out, oops, lung cancer. So,
not so good.
And yet it's still legal. What the hell? Crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, how are you finding in terms of like dealing with your illness? Are you finding that it's easier to kind of go a certain direction when it comes to nutrition and fitness? Have you find that perfect medium, or is it always changing?
I think it's always changing. You mentioned earlier just, things are always kind of evolving and changing, but I think because we're humans, we're complex beings, things are always different. There's so many things for us to take into that equation of our health. And so, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough exercise? What am I eating? What am I not eating? What kind of nutrients am I getting? Am I not getting enough nutrients? So over the years, it is definitely, I have obsessed about food. I did back in my early days when I was in my 20s, I did a few fitness competitions. And so in the early 2000s, I did a couple of fitness competitions. And that's where I really started to obsess about food, because my Crohn's wasn't. So my first symptoms were in 2003. I did fitness contests in probably 2001, 2002. But it's, you're counting every macro, you're counting every gram, everything you put in, you're trying to get down to unhealthy body levels of body fat. And then I get Crohn's, and then it's like, oh, I can't eat vegetables anymore.
Yeah.
And what am I supposed to do? So since then, it's kind of just been this journey of, okay, salads are out, can't eat salads, lettuce is bad. But then I figure out, oh, butter lettuce, I can kind of do butter lettuce. But then no salads, and then no lettuce. And so it's been this constant evolution for 20 years and I think it's kind of, I don't know, waxed and waned, I guess, as far as how my health goes, as far as what I can eat and how my overall intestinal health is doing. But over the years, long story short, we'll fast forward, I've tried a bazillion different things. Definitely, I think getting probiotics, fermented foods. I was fermenting for a while, so I was making my own sauerkraut. I've made my own sauerkraut, made my own kefir, don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
Made my own kombucha. That was fun. Then you end up with all these kombucha discs. Like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
So I've done all the weird things, but in the end, I have found that sticking with real whole foods, keeping my stress down, sleeping when I can, learning to listen to my body, I've learned to really simplify things. So right now, I've kind of been concerned that I haven't been getting enough nutrients, because over the years, I think a lot of IBD patients fall into this, but you whittle your diet down so far to where you're basically eating a chicken breast. So not getting a lot of nutrients. I mean, chicken's nutritious, but it doesn't have everything.
Right.
So I've started to be
full day anyway, right?
Exactly. So I've started to be concerned about my nutrients, because I also have kidney disease, IgA nephropathy. And so I feel, I really start to, I don't know, I feel nuances in my body. I feel like when I'm not getting enough nutrients, or just doesn't feel right. So I've started to drink Huel, because again, I saw it on Instagram, HUEL.
And as obviously, we know, every good purchase starts at Instagram.
On Instagram. So obviously I do all my shopping on Instagram, and I take all my medical advice from Instagram. But Huel has, I forget what it is, 27 vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you need. So I've started to drink that every day, and I've found I feel good with it, so I'll keep doing that.
And they're like ready to go smoothies, or
they're meal replacement shakes. So it's got protein, carbs. You mix it up, little protein shake. So I do drink that. Beef liver, so little capsules. I've started to take those. I used to take them years ago, but beef liver, I've started to take those. I think that's been helping with my iron. I tend to have low iron, so I take those, and then a multivitamin. Little gummy, because who doesn't like a gummy multivitamin?
Of course.
As if I'm 5. And then I try to have a healthy meal. But so I try to watch what I'm eating. I do eat a lot of sauerkraut still, and I do intermittent fasting. I told you that I do a lot of intermittent fasting, which I've been doing that for probably since 2015, 16, somewhere in there. So
Before it
going
was
on
cool, anyway.
before it was cool. It was just
Right.
starting to get cool.
Right.
Interestingly enough, for people who might want to try fasting, I first tried it probably in 2010. I tried fasting and I just thought, okay, it's easy. Just don't eat. That's all there is to it. So I did that. I was like, I'll just go a day and not eat. I think I went 5 hours.
Right.
Get me some freaking food.
So true.
So then I kept trying it. I was like, this is just too hard. This is ridiculous. I don't know who's fasting, but it's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Years later, I read again how beneficial it is for keeping inflammation down and just that gut rest, which is huge for people with IBD. So between wanting that gut rest and keeping my inflammation down, I thought, let me try it again. And then I did it again, but I did it more methodical and gently. And so I just simply skip breakfast. Like, okay, have my coffee. I'm just going to skip breakfast and then I'll have lunch. And then I can push lunch back a little bit. And then once I got into the routine of a 16-8, fast for 16, eat for 8, then I found I could really start pushing the limits. And so then I could do the 1 meal a day. And then I tried OMAD and then I tried alternate day fasting. And then when Crohn's got really bad, then I would extend it, not really bad, but enough symptoms to where it's like, I need to fix things. I think the longest I did was maybe 42 hours. And so did some longer fasts. And then I think I did enough alternate day fasting and enough just hardcore fasting and limiting my diet that now I'm at a point where 16-8 feels really good. I'm eating more foods. Vegetables don't bother me anymore. For years, I was really strict about what I ate and making sure that it was nothing processed and just really good, nutritious, valuable food. So
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
a lot of things kind of came together, and now I'm in a good spot where I'm not on medication. I'm in remission, except for this summer. I did have intestinal bleeding like all summer long.
Oh, wow.
Side note, I'm really pissed off at the doctors here in Florida, the one I saw for gastroenterology. So all summer long, June, July, August, tons of stress. I start having intestinal bleeding. I have not had intestinal bleeding in years. I call it and we were getting ready to move in August. So in late July, August, I tell my gastroenterologist that I have in Texas. And, he's concerned. He's like, with Crohn's, with IBD, he's like, I don't want to scare you. He's like, but it's kind of like you're always standing on this cliff and you're always on the ledge and you never know what it's going to take to just kind of push you over and send you in a big flare. So he's like, it's really critical. You got to go find, get set up with your next gastroenterologist. And I'm like, yes, I agree. And so then I get here, I go to the VA for my healthcare. I loved the Texas VA, Audie Murphy Hospital. Shout out to them. Not loving the VA here in Florida.
Whereabouts?
Bay
one?
Pines. I'm at the Bay Pines VA.
Okay.
I have a nurse practitioner who's my primary care provider. I love her. My nephrologist is good, but so I got my consult to gastroenterology. I've just been bleeding out my ass for 3 months, literally.
Oh.
That's not good. Just that sentence alone does not say good. Healthy.
Yeah.
So I go to the new gastroenterologist. I tell him this. He looks at my last 2 colonoscopy reports from 2021 and 2019. And they both were good because I'd been, really focused on my health, but those were both good. So he basically looked at me, saw me in a moment of health, and it was like, he literally said to me, assuming you even had it, Crohn's disease. And essentially told me to don't let the door hit you on the way out. He's like, I don't need to see you. I'm like,
what?
Holy shit. Like, first of all, I just told you my intestines have been bleeding for 3 months straight.
Yeah.
I have had Crohn's symptoms for 20 years. And that sent me. So then I go down a rabbit hole. I come home. I'm like finding every single colonoscopy report that I've had. I've had like eight colonoscopies. Multiple are, ulcerations and inflammation and crypt abscesses and, all this stuff,
Yeah.
And then there's like a couple good ones in there. So that was just really frustrating.
Ooh.
because, you know, you want to, as someone with a chronic illness, you want to know that, okay, maybe I'm not doing bad right now, but I want to know that I have somewhere to go, that
That's right.
you know, that I don't have to just go to the emergency room and have them look at me like, well, this is something else. Why'd you come to the ER? So,
yeah, and you know, I kind of had a similar situation too, where it's kind of, God, it's such a fucked up disease, this thing, because you know, you could kind of go through remission and not have any issues, and it doesn't look like you do, but this little Crohn's cat, he likes to hide. You know what I mean? He likes to just party in the intestines somewhere and then just come out whenever he wants. You know, it's weird though, and sorry I had to go through that, because and still going through that.
Yeah,
that's shitty. And you know, even one of my guys, one of the gastrologists here, supposedly one of the best in Florida, he was located in Tampa. I don't want to mention his name, but he definitely gave me some great advice. And then when it came to giving me a prescription, and he gave me Humira, which I think I told you this story.
Yeah.
And once he gave me that, and you know, it was almost like, hey, you got this now, you're good.
Yeah.
And then every time I would come in, it was more, all right, you good? All right, great. That's it. It was like a 2-minute appointment. And I'm like, I'm not a fan of how cavalier this guy is when it comes to these intestines. Because I would even tell him, I'd be like, but I'm still having this issue. This is what, you know, happened with my stool and this, that. And he's like, yeah, you're good. Just, you know, let's keep doing this dose and see what happens. And then I ended up getting a really bad infection from it. And then I just stopped talking to him. I stopped visiting him. And by that time, I moved a little bit south to Apollo Beach here, and I'm going to see a different specialist because I have a couple other issues kind of hanging out, where I actually have this cyst that got built up, and they say it's related to Crohn's somehow. So that got biopsied, and that's going to have to get removed pretty rapidly. So it's, you know, but again, it's like one of these things that Crohn's is the gift that keeps on giving. You know, it's it's constantly just ever evolving and changing, and unfortunately, there's no solution to it. I don't think. Quite yet.
And that's why it's so frustrating to be dismissed by a physician, by a gastroenterologist. It's frustrating to be dismissed because it's like, as patients, we have taken in so much information, and we know that it can cause so many different issues, and just having inflammation in the body can cause issues. So. Yeah. And I think also, I know for me, but I think probably a lot of patients feel this way, is I think that's why I have sought out so many different remedies, like fix yourself kind of a thing, because you can't, in some ways, you can't rely on the healthcare system because of situations like that, where it's like, I was literally just dismissed. And so it's like, you know, what am I supposed to do? And side story, the very, very first time I had my major flare. So I'd had, first of all, I blame my Crohn's on the anthrax vaccine. So, which you might like because you like conspiracy theories.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I blame vaccines on a lot of stuff. Yeah, I do.
But I think, you know, there's a lot of research as far as an environmental trigger for some of these autoimmune or chronic conditions, having that environmental trigger where it's not just one thing, but it's, you've got the genetic predisposition, you've got, you know, the DNA and everything. It's just all kind of there, but it's not active. And then it takes one thing in the environment to really trigger that cascade of effects in your body. So I really think it was anthrax, just the anthrax vaccine, just because it was right about that time when I got it, shortly after I started having intestinal bleeding. But, you know, I was 23 at the time, 23. And that's not really something you want to tell people about. Plus, I was living in a different state from my parents, so I didn't even have my parents nearby because I was at college. So it was just kind of like, well, I haven't died yet, so we'll just ignore this bleeding and see what happens for a week or two. And then it's like, well, I haven't died for 2 weeks, and so we'll just continue to ignore this. Side note, I do not recommend that. That is not my advice. Do not ignore intestinal bleeding.
Yes.
But then in 2006 was when I had like my first major flare up, where it was like bloody diarrhea every 15 minutes for weeks at a time. And I couldn't go to the hospital because I was not going to be able to be in my car long enough to make it to the hospital without having literally uncontrollable diarrhea. Like when people say uncontrollable, like people think, you've had diarrhea when you're sick, but
Right.
this was a whole different level of just, there was no controlling it. So I couldn't
And it's
go
like
to
it
the
doesn't
hospital.
end, right?
And it didn't end.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go to the hospital because I wasn't going to, mess up my car seat.
Right.
And
or their lobby.
exactly. And I wasn't
Yeah.
going to be able to wait in the,
Yeah.
in the waiting room for that long. And so I just didn't go. So finally it took 3-4 months before I finally was able to go long enough and be able to go to the hospital. I'd just gotten out of the Army. I didn't know if I had a primary care doctor or who it was. So I just thought I'll go to the emergency room and tell them I have intestinal bleeding and uncontrollable diarrhea. So I go there and I tell them this, and they're like, well, how long have you had it? And it's like, oh, well, now it's probably been 3 months. And then they look at me, and literally, I got asked the question in the ER by the gatekeepers, the receptionist, why did you come to the ER? Why did you feel it was appropriate to come to the ER when you've been having these symptoms for so long? You should have made an appointment with your primary care doctor. And it's like,
wow.
Oh, wow. Like I'm
Okay.
22, 23 years old. My parents are in a different state. My husband, ex-husband, but my husband at the time was on a different duty assignment, so he was not there. So I'm like alone. I go to the ER thinking, been bleeding out my ass for a while. I should see a doctor. And I'm basically told, why did you come here? So it's like, yeah, I'm just can't wait to go to the doctor again.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, gosh, I got to fix myself. So I think that's a big reason as to why for so many years it's like, let me experiment with my diet. Let me experiment with my fitness. Let me experiment with CBD and whatever other nutrient, supplements I can take, and L-glutamine and turmeric. I didn't have the turmeric paste like you mentioned on my show, but I was chopping up turmeric for a long time, and my hands are orange. My cutting board is orange. It's probably why I look orange in this video. It's all the turmeric.
And that never goes away, by the way.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, and what's interesting about everything you just said is not one person, at least for me anyway, not one person, not one doctor has ever went the nutritional route.
Yeah, neither for me.
Right? Yeah. Which is unbelievable considering. Yeah. And, then I, of course, got into this rabbit hole of, okay, so how many doctors are certified nutritionists? Yeah. The answer is 0.
Yeah.
A nutritionist is a certified nutritionist. But I think I don't want to quote this, but I'll probably make this a clip, but medical doctors that we see, for instance, whether it's intestinal doctors like gastroenterologist or, any doctor you go to, doesn't matter what it is, even the one that is giving birth to the OBGYNs that are giving birth to my child coming up, they require 0 nutritional certifications to be doctors.
Yeah. And I think in their entire educational training, because my ex-husband was actually a doctor, and he was really big into health and fitness too. So it really frustrated him that throughout the entire training, there was maybe like 15 minutes of coursework on nutrition out of the entire medical school, medical residency. And it was not anything in depth. It was like, here's the food guide pyramid, and you should, make sure your patients are following the food guide pyramid.
Which is all made up anyway.
Exactly. So, they really, they're not trained in nutrition. That's not what they study. That's not what they go to school for. And so it's hard to fault them for it when that's not their area. And then they don't know enough about it, and it hasn't been studied because there's no monetary gain to study food, because it's not a big pharmaceutical company that's going to make a lot of money if they find out that eating salads are good for you. So nobody's going to study it because nobody is going to have a way to earn money from that. And so it's just kind of this, leftover thing. But shout out to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, is they are the ones that have been doing a lot of research into diet, especially the specific carbohydrate diet and some other different kinds of diets and how they affect inflammatory bowel disease. So there is some research that's, happening and going on. It's just not as much research as perhaps there is behind certain drugs or medications. But
yeah, and research that it should be. Like the amount of research should be in conjunction with the amount of patients that are dealing with it.
Yeah.
But because there's millions of patients that have IBD and deal with Crohn's, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of people that are invested into it. And it all kind of stems from a very early age, right? You look at like what they teach in schools. Another reason why I'm terrified to be a father is not, am I going to be a good father? I think I'm going to be a decent father. I'm going to try.
What are they teaching? What's my kid going to experience in this scary world of 2023?
That's right. And, whether that's in pre-K all the way leading up to high school, it's frustrating to me. And it always has been, even when I didn't know I was going to be a parent, but it's always frustrating that we don't teach kids a lot at a young age. We teach them quite the contrary, right? We teach them things that they're not going to be using as they get older. I'd be very interested to know the thought process that goes into our government and how it gets passed down to that. I know there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories out there where, even as the conception of school started, when it was really just you want men and women to clock in and out so that they could eventually work for the man, quote unquote, the man. And, that's why we don't teach kids about real estate or investing or the economy and how that moves and works. We don't teach them about nutrition in school. Like, why isn't there, instead of calculus, why don't we teach kids the body and the anatomy and how kind of the body works? And I feel like if we teach these kids at a young age all the different things and how the mind works, how the body works, as we get older, we'll be able to use critical thinking skills and to make our own decision, because and by that, we make our own decision on how to move forward in life. Meaning, should I snort this line of Coke?
Yeah, probably not.
Because it does this to my body. Maybe I should treat my body like a vehicle and take care of it. But we just have these stupid ideas that we're watching all this stuff play out in school, and we're like, I don't know if I want to listen to this teacher talk, so I'm just going to rebel and I'm going to go do drugs and have fun and party because school's stupid. But if you could teach me all the good things in life, like real estate, like owning a home, like starting a family, like good community values, if you could teach me that stuff in school, then now I'm going to want to listen to it because I know it's going to pay off long term. And of course, there's still going to be kids that do drugs and rebel, and of course that's going to happen. But I think a vast majority of us would be like, ooh, this is beneficial, right? Because you can probably line up 100 people in their 30s right now and say, name me what you learned in middle school. And I bet 99 of them will say, I don't remember a fucking thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't use any of that stuff, right? So, like, why do we teach that? Is it just to keep kids occupied while the parent to work and make money? Maybe.
I do remember in middle school, I had a baking class. So I grew up in Utah, but I had a baking and a sewing class.
There you go. See, that to me is more.
But then we also
useful,
had
right?
part-time ski lessons too. So
also pretty useful.
So good.
More useful than than calculus. Yeah. Jesus. Yeah, it is kind of a weird thing, but again, this is all, we're learning so much, and I think the people that are born today, like my daughter, when she's born, she's going to live to be in the year 3000.
That's crazy.
Which is wild to think. Hopefully, I mean, thank God she lives, hopefully she lives to like 200. Maybe by that time they'll figure out ways to freeze brain cells or however they got to deal with that. But we're learning so much every day. And what we were taught in school, I think there was an excuse where, well, we don't know. We don't know about nutrition that much. So we're going to follow this food pyramid, and it's the best we know now. But now we know that's all garbage. And
but we're still promoting it.
That's right. Come to find out, they're still teaching that goddamn pyramid in school. It's a little bit more like steroided up, like, you know, a little more grains, a little more veggies, but they're still teaching about milk. And we know all the downfalls of dairy and what that can cause. And, you know, I'm not saying dairy is all bad, but there is more negatives that come from drinking dairy than water.
I did drink raw milk for a while as part of my Crohn's food experiments. So I've tried every diet and every fitness routine under the sun, but raw milk. So raw milk was interesting because, of course, I went to Google and I came across this story, and it's called the raw milk cure. So back in the, as I said earlier, I forget all the important details, but I don't know, back in the 50s or somewhere, they used to use raw milk to cure different diseases or sicknesses. And then I read a story of a Crohn's patient who drank raw milk and improved his Crohn's. And so I was like, I got to figure out this raw milk thing. So I started drinking raw milk because it's not processed. It's not like the milk you go to the grocery store and buy now. It's straight from the cow. It's got all of the nutrients. It's got all the nutrition it needs to raise a baby cow. And so I started drinking that. And I think that helped too. I think that was I started drinking like 4 or 5 cups of raw milk a day. It's very delicious, very creamy, very tasty. But you can't buy raw milk easily. So depending on what state you live in, it may be illegal.
Right.
So you can't even get it. But in Texas, I was able to find a local farm that if I went to the farm and bought the raw milk at the farm, I was able to buy the milk. So I went to the farm. They had grass-fed cows. They were milking the cows. It was pure raw milk. And you think about, you just think about all the good bacterias and the things that are in raw milk that are killed when it goes through pasteurization and processing. But that was a fun experiment.
That's fascinating. And I'd be open-minded to try that. I mean, I feel about dairy as passionately as I feel about meat, meaning deli meat. Yeah. We know is not the best high quality meat, right? It's not real meat. Most of it anyway. It's very processed, very, loaded with sodium and preservatives that, according to most doctors, you can't have if you're pregnant, right? So why even have it? But then you look at like, okay, so if you go out in the back and you have deer and you shoot the deer, skin the deer, cook the deer, that's going to be the most nutritious meat that you can have.
I think that's a perfect analogy for, oops, I just kicked over my water.
Uh-oh.
I think it's a perfect analogy for milk is meat, sorry, I know this is video, but I'm going to be over here, but it's a perfect analogy, like raw milk versus the milk you buy in the store is essentially deli meat versus grass-fed meat, wild-caught fish, things like that.
Yeah, that's right. And, again, this is the problem that I think we're running into, not just with the dairy industry and the meat industry, but just food as a whole. As what are we at now? Like 8 billion people on the planet. Yeah. So it's supply and demand. And now we're at the point to where we just want to eat as much as we possibly can. So a lot of these big corporations and companies are just loading up all their good food because they all started in a good place, I feel like. Each company, whether it's a fast food chain like McDonald's or Tyson Chicken, they all started in a place where it was maybe 100 people and they just wanted to cook the best chicken possible. They wanted to give us, the American people, the world, they wanted to give us the best product possible. And then we started just fucking and filling the earth with billions and billions of people. Next thing you know, now these companies can't keep up. And they have a bottom line, and they have stockholders, and they have hundreds of people that want bonus checks, and they want to do whatever they can to get that money. And what does that mean? Well, that means, if we cut this corner a little bit and we make this processed, we can save 5% on here and 20% here, and now we can get a bigger bonus check, and we get that Lamborghini now. So now all these CEOs and these big companies are like, screw the American people, screw the humanity, screw humanity. I just want to make money. And within 100 years, we have completely saturated Earth of its resources and agriculture. Yeah. And we've destroyed any chance, I think, of reversing this. I don't know if there's a way to come back from this. I know there's a lot of farms out there that are trying to do what they can. I believe it's called reverse agriculture, where you've heard of this?
I've heard of it. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
there's a term, it might be reverse agriculture, but where they're trying to reverse what agriculture has done, but put nutrients back into the land and
That's right.
different
And
ways of farming and back to the old ways of giving it breaks. And
because that's the key, right? Is if we can just stop eating for a second and just give the ground a break, because the reason we have to mass produce fish and the reason we slaughter cows and factory farming the way it is because we just eat too much. So we have to pump these things full of steroids to keep up with demand, and they have to grow faster, and they have to hurry and do it. So that's the issue. Is it's not that meat is bad. I don't believe in that. I'm the anti-vegan when it comes to that, because if you want to eat meat, we can do it. But the problem is, like, okay, so what if we eat all the cows on the planet? Let's just say hypothetically. Yeah. Are you going to eat meat anymore? You going to eat cows anymore? No, you can't, because it's all gone. So then what do you have to do? We have to relax. We have to raise the cattle from fresh, and we have to slowly grow that population back up. And then once we get it to a healthy place, then we can start eating meat again. And we just forgot that step. We're just like, feed me, feed me, feed me. And now we are at the point to where Beyond Meat is making fucking fake meat. And then that's pumped full of preservatives and oils, and who the fuck knows what's going to happen with people eating that. I mean, I'm guilty of eating every now and again as well. But, if we eat that for 10 years straight, what's going to happen to our intestines? Like, we just don't know what's happening, when all we could easily do, Stephanie, is just, let's not eat as much.
If the whole world could intermittent fast.
Just imagine if the whole world did intermittent fasting for like a year.
That'd be crazy. Yeah. The amount of food that would not be consumed.
Yeah, I mean, look at, we're overfishing the ocean. Now it's like a serious problem people don't understand. It is a massive issue where there is zero fish left for us to eat. And not only that, but now you look at like the predators that are in the ocean. So now you're seeing like all these great whites and these weird fish and mammals like, orcas and things that are going into areas that they've never gone into before. Yeah. And they think it's because, they're exploring.
They're looking for food.
Yeah, they're
trying to survive.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So next thing you know, who knows? I mean, 5 years from now, are great white attacks going to be more common because they're going into different areas of the ocean? It's it affects the whole ecosystem. We don't look out for the planet.
Yeah.
It affects us all. So it's but on that positive note,
I know. We're all gonna die.
We have 5 years to live. No, but it is fascinating how nutrition and our bodies are very interconnected, and we have to get a little bit better at educating ourselves, because it doesn't seem like people are gonna educate us on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to go to Google. We got to figure it out for ourselves.
We have to go to the unbiased search engine, Google. And
is there any other?
That's right.
Bing. Who's using Bing out there?
Bing, Yahoo, all that stuff. But no, this again, as always, this is a fun conversation. We could probably do this for another couple hours. So we'll have to maybe do this in person at some point as well.
That'd be wonderful.
But so Stephanie, let us know a little bit about more about your podcast, where to find it, what it entails, what your goals are, and let the people know where to find you.
Yeah, so basically just CROHNSFitnessFood.com. You can get to everything. So it's my website. I started that as a blog a few years ago, a little bit before I started the podcast, but podcast is also named Crohn's Fitness Food. So podcast, you can find that anywhere podcasts are available. And that's really just me interviewing other people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, so we can share more IBD stories. And Instagram, Facebook, Crohn's Fitness Food. So got to keep it simple. Crohn's Fitness Food. It's my alter ego, I guess.
I love it. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to get to know you a little bit more. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure visiting with you.
Oh, hey there. First of all, thanks for making it to the end of this video. Not a lot of people do, according to the YouTube analytics, but I do want to say thanks for listening to this. There's some more episodes if you want to check those out, and they're all just as good. But if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out those timestamps below to reference some of the topics I talked about, as well as some discount links to some of our sponsors and affiliates. But thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.